So I was smooth sailing through school, or so I thought. I began consistently living above my means, where I don't even know if I began. I think I was always doing this. The detriment to my story, that I didn't have the personal finance education to know that my spending habits would be my demise, even when I was so privileged with. I'm just kind of putting these thoughts out there. Hey, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Kirsten or Kit, and this is my personal finance channel where I talk about going from $50,000 in debt to combining my income with my partner and then us both working towards financial independence. And the topic of today's video is why I am not going to medical school and the financial hurdles that led me to that decision. It's out there because I've never heard anybody talk about their path to medicine like this. This is a tough topic to talk about. It's complicated and multifaceted, and I'm not really sure where to begin. I'm gonna do it chronologically, but because it is complicated, this topic is a bit ranty and might be long-winded. So I apologize in advance, but I do believe that there may be some nuggets of wisdom in here for somebody out there who's potentially going to go to medical school and they just wanna garner some information about somebody else's stories, maybe learn from their mistakes and do better for themselves in the future. A big caveat for this topic is that this decision was not solely financial to not go to medical school. While ultimately finances play a massive and primary role in deciding to diverge from school for me, it isn't the only reason, and I'll cover that in greater detail when I come to that point in my story. Right now, let's start chronologically with the aspiration to pursue medicine in the first place, and then the steps I took to get as far as I did in the process. It's graduation senior year 2013, 10 years ago. That's crazy. I'm at a rocky point in my life. I was graduating from a small school. They asked the students before they were walking across the stage what they were going to do after school, what their plans were, and I said that I was going to be a doctor or something of the sort, that I was going to med school. So as I walked across the stage, that's what they announced to the crowd. And while in high school, I had taken sort of pre-med type courses, medical biology and chemistry. That was about as far as I'd prepped for the arduous journey of medical school at that point. I know some students have it completely mapped out to the date that they're taking their MCAT at this point. That was not me. I went on after graduating high school to take multiple years off of school completely. I was traveling, living with extended family across the country and living with friends, working in restaurants to support myself. And I got a job opportunity through a family member where for the first time in my life, I had health insurance. And this mattered because I was 21 at the time. I had never received care for a knee injury that I acquired when I was 16 years old. And it affected my life because I was really active as a young adult. I wanted to go dancing and clubbing and go for a run, lift weights, do yoga, pick up a game of beach volleyball, which is one of the most fun things that you can do at the beach when you're drinking with your friends. But there was always the chance of me pivoting wrong, hyperextending my knee, and then collapsing, which not only hurt, left me sore and inflamed for weeks, and I would limp on it, but it was also embarrassing on all of those occasions. So with health insurance, I started being cared for by an orthopedic surgeon who did an MRI and most importantly spoke really kindly to me, spoke smartly to me, and kind of a role model. Most notably in an office visit, we were discussing the surgery. He was doing some tests on my knee, and he took a pause before exiting the room, hand on the doorknob, and turned back and looked me in the eye and just said, "Kirsten, I am so sorry this happened to you." And could have made me cry, just how floored I was, how moved I was by the humanness of this man and just the simple gesture to apologize for something not of his own doing. But I think that he genuinely meant it. That really gave me some kind of spark and got me interested in going back to school. So January of 2016, I got the knee surgery and I enrolled in a community college that same semester. So on crutches, rolling into class, super excited. I was going to begin my coursework to finish my AA that I had started in high school and then prepare for a pre-medicine track. And I was fired up about life, fired up about school, and I had never excelled in school like I did at this point, being so focused and inspired to pursue a degree in medicine. And then a final note to understand before continuing. I had the unique privilege to receive funding for my education from a family member who created a 529 plan for me called Florida Prepaid years before. They paid for that year's cost of tuition And then however many years later, when I went to school, I had a certain amount of tuition credits covered directly with those funds. So school is paid for, and I wanted to make that note, which I'll talk about later. I ended up leaving the job with health insurance benefits on a moral standing that I just couldn't reckon with, and then I began serving again at just a local watering hole to make ends meet. Another important note at this time was that my housing was covered. So I'm going to school full-time, working part-time, my basic tuition is covered, my housing is covered. So I'm just paying for extra sort of expenses, transportation. That same family member who created the Florida prepaid plan for us purchased a house near the colleges that I was attending with the purpose of renting it out to students and to me and my siblings or their kids free of charge while we went to school. So I was smooth sailing through school, or so I thought. I began consistently living above my means, where I don't even know if I began. I think I was always doing this. While yes, there are expenses with schools like books and you need a laptop and lab fees, etc. I was also spending money on clothes, vacations, or drinking out and other like trivial non-necessities. At this point, and for many years after, it's the detriment to my story that I didn't have the personal finance education to know that my spending habits would be my demise, even when I was so privileged with my schooling and my housing covered. I grew up definitely with a financial lack mentality. There was never enough. It was always a stressful topic to talk about money. There was no talk about investing or saving really. So at this time in my young adulthood, when I was finally free, it was willy-nilly. It was coffee or dinner or drinks out whenever I wanted, or a new outfit when I saw it and wanted it, and it was no big deal. And I remember on one occasion, I went to the Springs on a date with my now fiance and partner, and we were on our way home. I was talking about wanting to watch a movie. It was American Psycho. And I didn't have a TV at my house. And so on the way home, we stopped at Walmart and we bought a TV. I bought a TV on my credit card. He definitely thought I was a baller, and I was not. Let me be very clear. So just things like that. Absolutely silly and impulsive and kind of stupid, but you live and you learn. And that's definitely part of my story. There was no budget, and if I wanted something, I just acted on it. So let's fast forward a little bit. School got more time consuming as I began adding extracurriculars to bolster my med school application, things like volunteering and honors courses and community service. And I also matriculated from the community college where I excelled to the massive local university that it fed into. I was then a really tiny fish in a big pond of 70,000 undergraduate students. And school got much more difficult. So I had to stop working outside of school and then put all of my effort into academia. I started taking out student loans to support myself for food and transportation, and of course anything else that I could buy with the money before it ran out each semester. And I was really serious about school. So I thought that was the next natural step. Like I was taking Chem 2 in a fall semester, I think of 2018, and I got a C. And I was so devastated about my lack of dedication and commitment and time to school that I actually left my partner, like my fiance that I love to this day, left him and said that I needed time to myself. And we took a whole 2 semesters off for me to get back on track. That's how hardcore I was about school. Everything else just had to fall by the wayside. I thrived on campus though, and I was put onto multiple paid research opportunities in genetics, studying fruit flies, and GIS, where I got to travel internationally, work with an awesome group of people. And I also worked for the rec center, teaching yoga and meditation and coaching 5K and half marathon running programs. So my med school application, needless to say, was looking really meaty. And here is where the path gets tricky. I'm finding out more and more that the field of medicine right now in the United States, as I know this field best, which, trust me, my knowledge is lacking. It's convoluted by the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical industries. You know this if you've been to your primary care doc and you wait an hour to see them and you've spent 15 minutes with them. You don't feel like they understand what you're saying. They maybe don't have the time or the resources to look into your case if it's ambiguous. You don't feel like they know you very well. That's kind of the model that I'm talking about here. I could go on, but let me just digress by saying it was around this time that I was enlightened by this finding and then disheartened by the outlook of the patient care model that conventional medical school would allow me to practice. Not like I knew exactly what kind of medicine I wanted to go into, be primary care or have a specialty that's a little bit more niched down. So I opted for an alternative route, literally alternative medicine, holistic medicine, and I found solitude in the field of naturopathy. So I applied to 2 naturopathic medical schools, and on March 2020, COVID shut down the whole world. After essays and interviews over Zoom, I was accepted to both schools that I applied to, Bastyr and in UNM, and I received partial scholarships even. And so we were all sent home from school, but during that sort of lockdown in November 2020, I was able to visit both schools, and these are across the country in Washington and in Oregon. Mind you, there's a lot of things happening in 2020. It's also Black Lives Matter protests wreaking havoc on many cities. All of the shops in downtown, when you'd walk around, are boarded up. People are all wearing masks and social distancing. It is not a welcoming time to visit cities and to be traveling. So I went there with a purpose, but kind of an ugly time to be visiting. And at this time, my partner and I had the opportunity to move from our home state of Florida to Montana. And I was thinking that this would get me 90% of the way, at least physically in my body, to the schools that I would soon attend, because I was still dead set on fulfilling my passion and going to naturopathic medical school. My partner and I knew how important my education was to me. We were both on the same page, and I was gonna leave him to be in school, resolving to just do a long distance relationship. We've talked about the cost of living in these cities, and it was a stark increase to what we were used to. Seattle and Portland versus Orlando, Florida, big difference. And COVID was weird. So I ended up moving to Montana, falling in love with the lifestyle there. I was enamored by its beauty and its vastness. I've never seen so much land from standing in one place at a time. It's absolutely stunning. And I was easily convinced at this time to just let the world cool off, save some money, have a gap year. After being in school really intensely, I graduated in December 2020. So having a year off sounded really good. And I was gonna just wait for my partner and I to be more ready to move with me to begin school, either having a house or renting a place out there. At this time, I began working in a hospital as a CNA, and I fell in love with the work setting of a hospital, which I know there's a million memes about nurses hating their lives, like questioning their life choices on the way to work every day. But I really loved it. Rural medicine is of course a lot different as well. But I loved the staff. I loved the hospitalists. They were really respectful. I think being in that setting of Montana, people have priorities of their outdoor activities and their families, and they just really understand work-life balance a lot better, and just kind of keep in line with their values a little bit more than people in the city do. It's a lot of like slower pace of life. And I found out that as a CNA, I was really good at my job. I also at this time began seeing a naturopath. And this is something I didn't have access to in Florida, mind you. Naturopathy is not legal to be practiced in Florida. So I had spoken to naturopaths before, interviewed them myself, watched all of the videos, read all of the books that I could on the topic, but never had seen a naturopath. And again, I realized the reality of the constraints facing this field. And maybe with a little bit more intuition, I could have recognized these hard stop roadblocks, or these yellow lights at least, like Matthew McConaughey would say. But when I was going to see this naturopath, having healthcare covers none of the cost of naturopathic medical care. While I always viewed regular medical care as a privilege, not having had basic doctor visits for most of my adolescence, naturopathy was actually a luxury. I paid many times hundreds of dollars for each visit for wellness counseling, physical manipulation, or osteopathic manipulation, and botanical medicines. And this got me thinking, if I'm going to be in naturopathic medicine, how could I reach the patient populations who really needed care by this model of medicine, which required this level of out-of-pocket cost? So my work in the hospital gave me the confidence to again turn to pursuing conventional or osteopathic doctoral school, which I thought would be the best of both worlds. And also at this time, we're gaining momentum in our relationship. We realize that it's not a good move to leave the state and for me to start school. So I'm still accepted and still deferred. However, since I'm doing great in the hospital, I was failing outside of the hospital to get my own personal training and yoga teaching business off the ground, which I tried so hard to get that to work. And for me to just be working from home, doing Zoom calls, personal training in gyms, and doing one-on-one yoga teaching. But it was a struggle. Here we are in the beginning of 2022, and I go back to school to finish my last prerequisites, study for the NCAT, and begin applying to medical school. This is when my financial shit absolutely hit the fan. If you've watched my broke or financial rock bottom video, this is where it all comes to a head. In Montana, I took my sweet time to get my license, and it resulted in, when I went back to school, I didn't have in-state tuition, even though I had been there for plenty of time. I had no extra funds to pay for school, so I ended up taking out loans for out-of-state tuition, which is a big ouch. But back then, I was jazzed. I was so excited to be back in school, back in my element, taking school part-time, just microbiology, or in physics too, and then full-time work on the med floor at the hospital. I also bought an over $2,000 MCAT course and began studying for the MCAT about 3 hours a day. I was also writing my applications for med schools and listening to experts on the topic spout advice like to pay for medical school applications, which are about $200 a piece, and it's commonly recommended to apply to not just 10 but like 20 medical schools. You just take out credit cards, so you can do the math. 200 times 20, and then the MCAT itself is like $300 as well. I was a little bit nervous about that actually, because I had probably 7 maxed out credit cards at that point and really low credit limits on each one, like $700. I think $2,000 was my maximum credit limit on my best card, which it was maxed. And then I also had collection agencies calling me all the time. I had my number on speed dial, lucky me. And so, like I said, if you've seen my financial rock bottom video, you understand where this all comes to a head. It's May of 2022, Bradley proposes to me. I say yes, gladly. And then my financial responsibility clock finally matures, and ring, ring, ring. I'm 27 years old and I am fucked. There's no better way to put it. And there's no way I can continue down this path and become a physician. It took me a lot to realize that. I'm not embarrassed to say that it took me a lot to realize that, even though I worked on it for, if you think about 2016 to 2022, I was still going on that path. So 6 years and a lot of money down the line. But it doesn't matter how much time or how much money even I end up making after going to medical school. So you take out $200,000 of debt, because I wasn't getting that paid for. And I understand that there are ways to get it paid for, but let's just say, for instance, the average person takes out $20,000, that's funny, $200,000 of debt to pursue school because I never learned how to keep the money that I made. So it doesn't matter how much money I take out if I'm spending every penny that I make. And that's what was awful to realize. It's crazy that I didn't care about how much debt I had or was going to take out until it involved someone that I loved greatly. And that's what marriage was. In my mind, it was joining our accounts. It's not solely that, like it's a lot of other things, but financially at least, it was a combining of finances. So yeah, I had multiple ouches in 2022 because that hurt on like the self-love realization front as well. So I was self-destructive, and I needed to learn to love somebody else wholly to actually realize love for myself. And that's deep. Anyways, a year and 6 months later, here we are. No med school, a baby on the way, and financial wisdom I haven't paid a cent for. That's absolutely priceless. I feel so solid and resolute in my decision to not go to medical school. And I can say that with the most contentedness that I can find. I wouldn't give up my past 18 months of education for the world. I know now that what I have learned from all of my mistakes and crawling myself out of the hellhole that I got myself into will set me up for life, and set Bradley and I up for life, and our family up for life, with generational wealth on our pursuit to financial independence. So that's where we go from here. It is December 2023. I am just weeks out from having our first child. And what I've come to realize is that there are other avenues to pursuing a higher education. I can go to nursing school with in-state tuition and partial tuition reimbursement from working at a local hospital once the baby is born. I'll have residency here in about a year. It'd be perfect timing. And it would cost about a month's salary once I began working as a nurse. If you think about that, that's a massive difference from the cost of medical school, which would take every dime of my residency, 4 years, plus some to pay the debt back. I could go on from nursing, if I went that route, pay for my master's degree or doctorate in nursing out of pocket, while continuing to get experience working. And that's the main difference. So if you look up the cost benefit analysis of nursing or even PA school or a medical degree, it is vastly different. And the time to pay back is vastly different as well. As a nurse, there's also better work-life balance. The residencies of 80-hour work weeks aren't a thing. Specialty training as a doctor that lasts for 10 to 15 years, not a thing as a nurse. There's also lateral movement as a nurse. So you could begin working on a med floor, transition to hospice care, you could become a caseworker, you could work in so many different settings. There's even nurses that work from home. And, typically like a nurse that works on a med floor, it's 12 hours on, 3 days in a row, 4 days off. So think about what you can do with 4 days rather than 80-hour work weeks every week. The older I get, the more I place value on what's truly important to me as well. My relationships with my friends and my family, traveling with my partner, learning and teaching. Those are the things that really matter. And I don't need to be a medical doctor to check those boxes. And here's another thing. School will always be there. Tuition will always keep rising, but school will always be there. I'm not one of those people who stop going to school and lose their drive to go back. I've clearly proved that more than once. I could see myself loving working at a university, surrounded by the different passions of young people. I could teach and I could take coursework for free and maybe even eventually end up with my PhD. I could see that checking those boxes as well and allowing me also the work-life balance to travel and be with family and do all of those things that I want to do. So I'm not sure where to end this beast of a story, honestly. But if you're going through it and thinking about med school and are paying your way through it with some hurdles of personal finance and things are popping up for you special considerations in your life. I don't mean to post this to deter you whatsoever. I just want you to know that you're not alone. I'm all for beating the odds and making your dreams come true, even if you aren't financially super set. Even though I was financially super set and kind of let it all go to shit anyways. I'm just kind of putting these thoughts out there because I've never heard anybody talk about their path to medicine like this. And that's about it. I kind of wish the conclusion was a little bit more resounding and impactful, but I just hope a fraction of what I said resonates with somebody. Thank you for listening, and feel free to check out my other videos for more of my story. I post every Saturday.